The reason why I'm not a Muslim is because Judaism is really an ethno-religion. The biggest issue that I have with Judaism is that Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. I'm I/B, and today I'm going to explain to you why I'm not a Jew, why I'm not Muslim. In our last video, we examined the major worldviews, and we left monotheism just for this one standalone video. The reason we did that is because 58% of the world subscribes to a monotheistic religion. We're going to examine them using the same criteria that we did in our last video. We're going to see if they're logically consistent, if they're empirically adequate, and we'll see if they are existentially relevant. I want to start with Judaism. When I was growing up, I had a cousin who was Jewish. Before making guesses about my family tree, you have to know that he was Korean, full-blooded. At some point in his life, though, he converted to Judaism. I remember watching him eat the Passover lamb. I watched him put on his yarmulke. He would read the Tanakh in Hebrew. He would pray in Hebrew facing Jerusalem. He was a pretty special guy, and I remember I would chide him about his conversion to Judaism, but I only chided him a little bit because he was extremely strong. He could break a glass tumbler with his hand just by squeezing it. But years later, I realized a few things about Judaism, which is why I'm not Jewish today. While Judaism is divided into 4 major divisions, they all share a few things in common. First and foremost, I believe that Judaism is really an ethno-religion. What do I mean? It's a fusion of an ethnic group with a religion. And the fact is that although Judaism does allow converts to the faith, not every branch of Judaism does this. Only the more liberal branches allow that. And you'll never see Orthodox Jews proselytizing. You have to understand their history as a people. Their call to be the chosen people traces back to Egypt at the time of the Exodus. And this is, in some ways, the point that anchors the collective identity of the Jewish people and religion, which means that if you don't have Jewish ancestry, you will have an impossible time of trying to become an Orthodox Jew. You see, God chose them. They didn't choose God. If you're not Jewish by ancestry, this is a major obstacle to overcome. But my second point of contention with Judaism is, in its purest forms, you have to learn Hebrew. Do you remember I told you that my cousin would recite, he would read, and he would pray in Hebrew? Well, the truth is that almost all the Orthodox Jewish communities that I am aware of have their worship services in Hebrew. And that's going to be a challenge if you're not a polyglot or you have struggles learning other languages. The biggest issue that I have with Judaism is that I believe that Judaism is a works-based religion. You see, in Judaism, salvation is achieved by obedience to the law, good works, and repentance from sin. The problem is that all works-based religions have some common human behaviors that ultimately devolve over time. Number one, there's a potential for self-righteousness. In essence, if salvation is something that's viewed as earned, it can foster pride in those who believe they're meeting the requirements. That can lead to self-righteousness, which can develop a judgmental attitude, a lack of compassion for those who are struggling or falling short, and the emphasis can shift from comparing one's deeds to others instead of the standard. Not only that, works-based religions tend to have a focus on external behavior versus genuine internal transformation. Not only that, when someone makes an egregious violation of the standard in a works-based religion, it's possible, because there's a lack of metrics on how many good works outweigh a bad deed, of knowing whether or not you have genuine redemption from your mistakes. And so the problem is that it can lead to a cycle of guilt and shame. Often, works-based religions have comparisons or competition among followers because people are trying to outdo others in terms of obedience or righteousness. That leads to a breakdown in the unity of a community. But there is the biggest issue, which I see as the failure to address the problem of sin, because this ambiguous metric of having your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds has to confront the reality of human sinfulness and weakness. And so when people make mistakes, how do you know that you've been restored or forgiven? How do you know that atonement has been made? You see, all these works-based religions, and it's not just Judaism, it includes Islam, Sikhism, all of these works-based religions, they put the burden of salvation on the individual. That's a pretty heavy burden. And the reality is that in moments of weakness or failure, it can result in hopelessness and despondency because people can't save themselves through their actions. To me, Judaism fails in its claims as a religion because to me, it's not existentially relevant, especially if you're not of Jewish ancestry. Let's talk about Islam. The reason why I'm not a Muslim is because Islam has some significant issues for me, and they're centered around the Quran. Islam teaches that the Quran is verbally inspired. To understand it fully, it means that you have to learn Arabic. And this goes back to the issue of, okay, God sends his messenger with a message encapsulated in the Quran. But in order to learn it, you've got to learn Arabic, which God knows is less than 5% of the global population. As we're talking about the Quran, my second issue with Islam is that I believe that the Quran is both scientifically and historically inaccurate. And I'm going to just put these references there on the screen because I believe that these references show that Islam is not empirically adequate. It does not match reality. These things are just not scientific and not historically accurate. Again, these issues are real issues. But my biggest contention with Islam is really the fact that I believe that Islam is not existentially relevant. It has to do with the character of Allah. Now, when you look in the Quran and then you compare Allah's character to the God of Judaism or Christianity, Yahweh, very, very different. You see, Allah is monad. He is inherently not relational. On the other hand, Yahweh is 3 in 1. He is intrinsically relational. The implications are huge. You see, if Allah is the greatest and in his nature he is removed and does not desire a relationship, then Islam exalts the qualities of being removed and non-relational. Nothing else in the Quran indicates that Allah wants a relationship with humans. In fact, it explicitly denies in the Quran that Allah is a father. It rebukes this idea, in fact, because the Jews and Christians say we are the children of Allah and his beloved. But the response is, well, then why does he punish you for your sins? Rather, you are just human beings from among those he has created. Now, I want you to understand that this is a huge issue because human beings naturally, we are instinctively desirous of relationship. And to me, this picture of Allah is almost hopeless or forbidding because it makes Islam seem existentially irrelevant for me. So for me, Islam fails. Why? Because I believe that it's empirically inadequate and also existentially irrelevant. Now, I know that many of you are familiar with Judaism and Islam, but if you're not familiar with Sikhism, in the video description below, I've put a link by a channel called Cogito that does a great job of a very informative, concise video that gives you the overview of Sikhism. And after you watch that, you can come back and understand why I have a problem with Sikhism. You see, in Sikhism, God is a formless, genderless, universal God beyond description. The believers believe that God is all of reality and within everything. Now, if you heard that carefully, I don't classify Sikhism as a panentheistic religion, but it has some elements of panentheism. But here's the kicker. Sikhism teaches that their God, Guru, is the same God in their faith as Allah is to the Muslims, as Yahweh is to the Jews and Christians, as Vishnu is to the Hindus. Now, that's pluralism or universalism. And you already know that these religions, Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, they're not all the same God. And they're mutually exclusive, which means that they're all claiming to be the correct one to the exclusion of all others. Now, you have to know that to me, that's a logical inconsistency. But not only that, in Sikhism, there's an element of predestination. You can't choose to be a Sikh. Guru has to choose you. You don't choose him. The final issue that I have with Sikhism is that in Sikhism, salvation, which is escape from reincarnation, only happens by good works. Now, we've already said that any religion based on salvation by works always falls into these patterns. I believe that Sikhism is both logically inconsistent, but it's also empirically inadequate and existentially irrelevant. If you're not familiar with Zoroastrianism, again, there is a link in the description below by the channel Cogito. They do a great job of giving you an overview of Zoroastrianism. But in our video, I'm going to focus on why I have issues with this particular religion. My main issue with Zoroastrianism is that they uphold a god, Ahura Mazda, as the god of good and order. But there is an equally powerful god of evil, Angra Mainyu, who represents chaos and lies. Now, to me, this would make Zoroastrianism a dualistic religion, but who am I to categorize world religions? Nevertheless, there are some challenges. Anytime you have more than one god, you begin to run into problems. Let me give you an example. You could ask, if the god of light is all-powerful, keep that word in mind, all-powerful, why hasn't he defeated this god of darkness? If the god of light is all good, why did he allow evil to exist in the first place? This is a logical inconsistency. This dualism is a problem because if two gods are genuinely eternal and equally powerful, neither can ultimately triumph, which leads to an eternal stalemate. This challenges the idea of a decisive victory of good over evil, which is a concept central to many religions. There is ethical implications to this religion as well, because if there is an equally powerful god of evil, you could justify immoral actions by claiming that you are serving this god of evil. But there's more about Zoroastrianism. You see, Zoroastrianism also has a practice, I'm not going to even try to pronounce it, that is marrying your nearest of kin, your closest relative. That is not empirically adequate. It's not a good idea from a scientific standpoint. Not to mention the social and cultural stigmas that could be attached to that in our modern world today, right? One of the biggest issues with Zoroastrianism has to do with the historicity of Zarathustra. Now, he's known as Zoroaster or Zarathustra, but the founder of Zoroastrianism is not generally agreed upon as to when he actually existed. Now, some critics of Christianity will say that Zoroastrianism was the basis for which Christianity counterfeited many ideas, but that's actually not true for the reason that it's impossible to even anchor when Zoroaster or Zarathustra actually existed. Not only that, this difference isn't just by, a couple centuries, it's by over 1,000 years. There's one more problem I should mention. Zoroastrianism is also an ethno-religion, depending on where you would choose to practice it, because there's two major places, India and Iran. And depending on where, you may not be allowed to practice or become a member, because in that culture, you would have to be born Zoroastrian in order for you to practice and be part of that religion. I want to explain to you why I'm a Christian monotheist. Number one, monotheism is logically superior to polytheism, and we really have a better explanation in our last video for that. Number two, Christianity has documented evidence of Jesus' existence by both religious and secular historians, and evidence for his death and resurrection. Now, this fact distinguishes Christianity from all the monotheistic religions. And don't believe the fables about Zarathustra's origins, which are obscure, very questionable, more like a fable. The Bible is a historically and scientifically accurate book. Numerous studies have analyzed its reliability. A quick search on YouTube will pull up dozens of excellent videos on this topic. But to me, the most important reason is because Christianity offers a personal God, one who cares. The most important feature to me, which is existentially relevant. The implications of this fact alone make Christianity stand out from all the other religions. Even if there was no proof of the historical Jesus, and even if there was no evidence of his resurrection, which there is, by the way, the fact that Jesus offers us compassion, sympathy, hope, and comfort is a heart-changing attribute. To me, this is the strongest draw of all, and it makes Christianity stand out among all the monotheistic religions. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'd love to hear your comments in the section below. Be sure to check out our other videos on this channel, and please help the channel by liking and subscribing if you haven't already done so. We hope you'll join us in our next video. Until next time, I'm I/B, and I'll see you again.